There are places the world forgets, not because they vanish, but because they whisper too quietly to be heard. Off the coast of northern Norway, surrounded by a sea that never sleeps, there lies an island, barely visible on most maps. It's called Bastøy. Today, it looks peaceful. Pine trees sway in the cold wind. Seabirds trace circles above the gray water. But for more than a century, Bastøy has been a place where isolation was both punishment and salvation. This is a story of the world's quietest prison, and how one remote island changed the meaning of what it means to be truly alone. When Bastøy Prison first opened in 1900, it wasn't meant for hardened criminals. It was a reform school, an island for unruly boys, as the government called them. Boys as young as 11 were sent here for stealing bread, skipping school, or talking back to their fathers. They were told they'd be corrected. But what they found instead was silence. There were no walls, no barbed wire, no guard with rifles, only the vast sea surrounding them, a barrier more perfect than any concrete wall could ever be. The boys lived in wooden houses, woke before dawn, and worked in the freezing wind on farms they would never own. Each day stretched endlessly, soundless except for the tide. Psychologists today call it sensory deprivation through environment. But back then, it was simply called discipline. In 1915, the world caught a glimpse of what that silence had created. After years of beatings, starvation, and forced labor, the boys revolted. They burned their dormitories, stole boats, and tried to escape across the icy fjord. Newspapers called it the Bastøy Uprising. Norway sent warships to crush a rebellion of children. For the next 80 years, the island remained haunted by what it represented. The idea that isolation could fix what society could not. But time does strange things to places. In 1982, the Norwegian government made a radical decision. They reopened Bastøy Prison, but this time it would be different. No more bars, no solitary confinement, no weapons. Instead, inmates would live in small houses, farm the land, and learn to cook, to repair, to read. They would be trusted. When journalists first arrived, they called it the world's nicest prison. But the truth is more complicated than that. Behind its calm beauty, Bastøy became an experiment, one that tested the limits of trust, forgiveness, and what we believe about punishment itself. Inmates here are murderers, thieves, and arsonists. Yet every morning, they wake to the sound of the ocean, not the slam of metal doors. They ride bicycles instead of being marched in lines. There are no guards watching them every second, only the horizon. And somehow, it works. Norway's reoffending rate, just 20%, is among the lowest in the world. In the United States, it's closer to 70. Criminologists from across the globe have studied Bastøy, trying to understand how a prison without walls could work better than one filled with them. The answer isn't in policy, it's in psychology. When you strip away violence and fear, what's left isn't weakness. It's accountability. The inmates of Bastøy aren't running from punishment. They are forced to face it day after day through reflection and routine. Isolation isn't a weapon here. It's a mirror. One former prisoner said something that still echoes through the island's wind. Out there, I was treated like an animal. Hey, I learned to be human again. That quote became the soul of Bastøy, because the real prison was never the island. It was what each man carried inside himself when he arrived. As the years passed, Bastøy became a symbol, controversial, misunderstood, but undeniably human. To some, it's proof that empathy can reform even the darkest lives. To others, it's an insult to justice, a paradise for those who deserve none. But if you stand on the island at dusk, when the sea turns silver and the world goes still, you start to understand something else. This place isn't about comfort. It's about confrontation, with silence, with guilt, with who you really are when no one is watching. The world's quietest prison teaches a loud lesson, that isolation, when forced, breaks people. But when chosen, when guided with trust and intention, it can build them again. Maybe that's what makes Bastøy so haunting. It isn't just an island. It's an idea that redemption begins not when the doors close, but when the silence begins.